Hi, class. We are now in Chapter 3. In Chapter 3, we're going to talk about competing in the global marketplace. Global marketplace means around the world. How can we actually match China or Japan or Switzerland in terms of competing for goods and services? That's what this chapter is all about. Learning objective, we're going to discuss the importance of global markets, I should say, and the role of comparative advantage and absolute advantage in global trade. We'll also explain the importance of importing and exporting, really important there, and understand key terms used in global business. Importing and exporting right now is a major, major concern because of all the tariffs that President Trump has instituted around the globe. And so this is going to be a whole different conversation that we should be having in terms of just simply importing, exporting. How creatively are we going to be able to import and export? We're going to talk about illustrate the strategies used in reaching global markets and explain the role of multinational corporations. Evaluate the forces that affect trading in global markets. We'll also get into debating the advantages and disadvantages of protectionism. And also, we're going to discuss the changing landscape of the global market and the offshore outsourcing. A lot of folks are turning to other countries to produce their items, and that means we're actually taking jobs from America, from our citizens. But is that good or is that bad? Is the company getting stronger? We'll look into all of that. Tim Cook, CEO of Apple Computers. He grew up in Alabama and received an MBA from Duke University, a very prestigious university. He worked for IBM. I grew up with IBM. Some of you, I'm probably dating myself, but IBM was the biggest company around. If you work for IBM, you were somebody. So he worked there for 12 years after becoming COO, Chief Operating Officer. Then he went to work for Apple in 1998. My daughter was born in 1998, 27 years ago. He streamlined the supply chain, managed worldwide sales and operations before becoming CEO, Chief Executive Officer, after Steve Jobs' death. Apple has since grown substantially amidst global challenges. So what Apple did was look around the world to see how they can do business better. Their technology, let's say some of their actual software, their hardware, they really kind of dug in, and Apple is the number one company in the world. Name this company. I love that these little tidbits of information come up so that you can kind of think about how things have changed. So this is the world's second largest athletic gear maker. So can you tell me, first of all, they decided to close their footwear factories in Ashbosh, Germany, suburban Atlanta, Georgia, and moved all of it to a high-tech speed factory in Vietnam, South Vietnam, of course, where they will invest in automated production technology for footwear. Who can that be? We know it's not Nike because this is the number two. So who is number two? Adidas. That is what global positioning is all about. So Adidas realized they were spending a great deal of money producing their number two shoe against Nike. And 70% of a company's overhead is labor. So if this is automation and is a factory and it can put out, let's say, twice the amount of athletic gear than Nike, then they're going to be basically stronger on the world stage. The dynamic global market. Business in the global market itself. So global business is expanding rapidly. We all see that, especially with AI and technology. The world population of 7.7 billion makes it a huge market of potential customers, which means these are so many people on the planet right now that every market has an opportunity for you to gain some type of, let's say, advantage for your company. Global trade. What is global trading? It's importing and exporting. Importing means we're actually buying products from other countries, from China, from Taiwan, from Japan. Exporting, we're actually selling the products. A lot of products coming out of America are considered exporting. We have a lot less exporting than importing. So there's an imbalance there, which means we get, I would just say 90% of some of the products from China, they take 10% of ours. And that's been a struggle for years, for decades, and that's something that we've been trying to correct. Something is happening right now with President Trump. He's putting a lot of tariffs on importing from other countries. He's saying, look, if you're not going to take all of our products we're giving you, then we're not going to take all of your products you're giving us. Otherwise, he's trying to get a balance there, but he's doing it in a way that's a little bit dramatic, a little bit risky, and we're not looking down the road a piece at some of the ramifications. One of the actual circumstances that prevailed is we recently, my son and I went to Comic Con, and in Comic Con, I couldn't believe that the people were telling me that it's like twice the size normally of vendors and people coming from around the world because of the tariffs as well as the ICE crackdown. Now they're actually looking for people who are not legally in the country. So that affects business. So global markets sometimes change. The opportunity for you to be part of a global market changes when our political systems actually get a little more aggressive, and that's what we're facing now. Global sports, this is something that's really great because I grew up, of course, in San Diego, and I grew up in New York, and I grew up in Virginia, and I grew up in other places. And football is football to me. When I was in Virginia years ago, these really cool kids moved across the street from us, and they were from Korea, South Korea, of course. And they kept kicking this ball around on the ground, and I kept thinking, as me, an African American, why don't you pick it up and throw it in the hoop? It's a white ball, you're kicking it on the ground, it's getting filthy. That was my first experience with soccer. So that shows you that the exposure that we have in America needs to actually, how do you say, be lent out to the world to show our sport. So it may not be what the rest of the world calls football, but American football is attracting an audience outside of the United States. For example, London Wembley Stadium has been home to the NFL's International Series for years upon years, since 2007. And now the league actually recently signed an agreement for 10 more years. So, what cultural factors, though, when they consider this, must the U.S. sports franchises overcome in order to increase their population abroad? Well, they've got to look at cultural, let's say, differences. They got to look at the way things are done in different countries. They have to be ambassadors of goodwill. There's a lot involved in going to another country and just teaching them your sport. It's great that other countries are embracing football, but it got to make sure that we take it to the point of saying we're still going to be goodwill ambassadors, and that's what global sports really are focusing on now. World population by continent. You can look at the amount of people per continent and get an idea of the vast ability to tap into those markets. North America has 4.7 billion people on the planet. Asia and so forth. So it's kind of giving you a little perspective of what is available in terms of a global market. We can tap into Europe, Asia, Africa, Oceania, which is Australia, South America, and so forth. World population, this is the projection. In 2050, we're looking to have 9.3 billion people on this planet. That makes you think about that is a bigger pool of people to actually have as your customers. But you've got to be able to figure out how to reach those people. Pleasure doing business. These are the best countries to do business with around the world. Number one, United Kingdom, which means their tariffs or their trade tax or however they import and export is great according to the rest of the world. So number one is United Kingdom. Sweden number two, Hong Kong number three, the Netherlands number four, New Zealand, Canada, Denmark, Singapore, Australia, and Switzerland. Something's missing on that list. Where's the United States? We don't rank even 1 through 10 in terms of countries to do business with. The best countries for business. Well, which countries have the most billionaires? That's kind of interesting. Look, the United States. We have 705 billionaires. China, Germany, Russia, United Kingdom, Switzerland, Hong Kong, and India. Look at the numbers. Why do we have 705 billionaires? Because our country population is bigger than most other countries. So here's the other question you'll have is why trade with other countries, other nations? Why do we care? Why can't we just keep our products? Because there's some things we can't produce and some things that other countries can't produce. Like we have cotton. We had for years upon years. African Americans actually picked cottons for years upon years, and that was the GDP for the United States of America. And that's how trading began. Other nations wanted our cotton to produce clothing. In turn, they created the clothing and gave it back to the United States, of course, at a price. So countries with abundant natural resource, an abundant natural resource such as Venezuela, they need the technology resources from other countries such as Japan. They don't have technology. And Japan may not have some of the resources that Venezuela can produce. That's why we trade. Global trade allows countries to produce what they make best. The United States and cotton, the United States and other products that we do best, which was cars for a while out of Detroit. Okay, and then buy what they need from others. For example, maybe we can't get some technology. For example, Germany produces Mercedes. My car is a Mercedes. Certain products we can't make here, we have to constantly get from Germany. I had something go wrong in my car with my CarPlay. I couldn't talk to the car through my phone. It was an $8,000 repair. Thank goodness I had car warranties and it was covered. But they had to get the product from Germany. We don't make it here. That's a good example of free trade. So the movement of goods and services among nations without political or economic barriers. That's what free trade's about. We don't have that right now. We do have economic barriers and we have political, let's say, agendas now. So we got pros and cons in terms of free trade. You can see right here, some of the pros are global market contains, we said this, over 7.7 billion potential customers for goods and services. The con, domestic workers, particularly in manufacturing-based jobs, can lose their jobs due to increased imports or products shifting to low-wage global markets. So you can look through the pros and the cons in terms of what actual free trade will bring about. Why trade with other nations anyway? We mentioned this before. We have a comparative advantage. A country should sell to other countries those products that it produces most efficiently and buy from the other countries those products that it cannot produce as efficiently or effectively. It's kind of an oxymoron when we say that we create nothing but amazing things in America and Americans buy American products. That's not the case with Walmart. Do your homework. Research where Walmart gets most of their inventory. China. Take a peek at the documentary I may post it online, but it's called Walmart, the actual price of low prices. That's pretty insightful. It's a lot to think about. Absolute advantage. Absolute advantage is a country has a monopoly on producing a specific product or is able to produce it more efficiently than all other countries. What can you think of? Who does that? The oil industry. We produce some oil in the United States, but 90% of our oil comes from Saudi Arabia, comes from other countries, because that's one thing we don't have a major resource of, which is oil. Who does the U.S. owe? Wow. Who do we owe? Countries that owe the most U.S. debt, they own the debt, I should say, is Ireland in the billions, Brazil, United Kingdom, of course, China, and Japan. Japan owns us, basically. They own us because we owe them so much money. Why do we owe them so much money? Some of the trade, some of the loans, some of the bonds. They may buy some of our bonds from our companies. And if you get enough bonds, you own a good amount, a good portion of the companies. So there's a good example of why the open trade is important. Free trade is important. Getting involved in global trade, importing goods and services. Products that are widely available in one country may be unavailable in another. Buying by working with producers in their native country, people can become major importers. Getting involved in global trade continues there. We talk about the pop culture trends And this is one thing that people don't really realize is that when something becomes popular, everybody wants it. So although Funko's Pop, okay, line of toys aren't very lifelike, that hasn't stopped these big-headed figurines from becoming a global sensation. So Foucault's toys usually take on the appearance of famous fictional characters or pop culture icons, giving them widespread appeal to collectors all around the world. As a result, each year Foucault earns tens of millions from sales of its pop toys. Does a career in the global collectors market seem appealing to you? Some people realize that might be a niche for them. That might be a market they might want to get into. Global pop cultural trends. Global customers increasingly listen to influencers. TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, Snapchat. People are listening to other people and they're taking their recommendations to stay competitive in today's global business environment. Now, here's the key. This is a global business, which means when I grew up, we didn't have the internet. We didn't have the ability to see what China's producing or India's producing or wherever. We only saw what was in our privy in Brooklyn, our own neighborhood. So, in order to stay competitive in today's global business environment, companies are looking to improve the effectiveness of their social media marketing. That's huge. If your company that you're working with or your own company, if you're not in social media, you're going to miss the bus, so to speak, as they would say. Influencers are powerful personalities with social media followings that number in the millions, giving them enormous power over their fans. Someone says this product is great, a million people say, I believe her or him. Wow. So, global marketing through social media. Savvy brands are paying billions to promote products on their feeds of famous social icons. Getting involved in global trade, we know there's a balance of trade. Trade surpluses are favorable when the value of a company's exports exceed that of its imports. That's what we want. Trade deficit, which is unfavorable. That is the opposite. So that's when the value of a country's imports exceed that of its exports. We're experiencing that right now with China. We know that 90% of the items that we see in Walmart are from China, and only 10% are from America. And China is not in the business of taking more of our products because they have a monopoly at this point. They're giving us 90% up from technology to cars to all these things that we need, but they're not taking ours. So that's an imbalance. Measuring global trade balance of payments right here. The difference between money coming into a country from exports and money leaving the country from imports, plus money flowing from other factors such as tourism, foreign aid, military expenditures, and foreign investments. The goal is to have more money flowing into a country than out. Favorable balance. An unfavorable balance is when more money flows out of a country. And that's what you don't want. That's why some people say, why? How did New Zealand go bankrupt? Or how did this country just plummet? Because they had more actually coming in than going out. People weren't buying their product. Dumping, good example here, selling products in a foreign country at lower prices than those charged in the producing country. Dumping is prohibited in the United States. Getting involved in global trade is important. All right, so we're wrapping up this mini lecture. I'd like you to continue looking at the rest of the PowerPoints like I've always said, and we're going to basically have you back that up with the textbook, videos, as well as PowerPoints. With that said, folks, that concludes the mini lecture for Chapter 3, which was talking about competing in the global marketplace. Thank you.